Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. I always giggle when someone calls me doctor. It's true, I know, but it's still funny to me. So I have a lot to talk about today, so I'm just going to dive right in. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit more background about me and why it is I feel confident in talking about what I'm going to tell you about today. Then I'm going to talk about things that are going to make vegans very happy about how great and sustainable it is to be vegan. And then I'm going to present some tougher stuff that might get what I hope a discussion going and pose some thoughtful questions. And then hopefully we'll have time for more questions during the talk. So, okay, who am I? I'm a lot of things. I'm from New York, New Jersey. I've lived in the woods. I was an organic farmer. I had chickens. I inherited them. It's a weird, long story. But that was my favorite rooster. His name is Rocket. And I'm also vegan. I've been vegan for 17 years. And I love to make food, and I care a lot about nutrition, all those sorts of things. This is all true. This is all me. And I actually read Frances Morse Lappe's book in high school. I went vegetarian when I was 14 and vegan when I was 18. And really what I wanted to talk a little bit more about was why the heck should you listen to me? How is it that I know anything about what I'm talking about? Well, in graduate school, I studied something called Lifecycle Assessment, which is a method of summing up all of the environmental benefits and burdens from the production, use, and disposal of goods and services. And that includes food products. It includes agricultural things. And I did my master's thesis and my dissertation on biofuels, which are fundamentally an agricultural crop. Based on agricultural crops, I studied corn production. I studied a lot of commodity crops. And I was already vegan, but it was very eye-opening to see all of the environmental impacts, not just climate change. It's not just about climate change, from the production of commodity crops. Does anyone know who I'm standing next to in this picture?
Stephen Chu.
Yes! Nerd points for you. Yes! One of my absolute heroes that I've looked up to for a very long time. Former Secretary of Energy and Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Stephen Chu. I met him the day before I defended my dissertation because, long story short, the project that funded my dissertation was funded by the Department of Energy. He was the head of it. He wanted to meet the grad students who were actually doing the work. And that was a huge day for me. And the next day they called me doctor. I mean, it was just, amazing. So after I studied that in graduate school, I went on to work for a small bio-based fuels and chemicals company called Virent. They make bio-based plastic and a lot of other things, but it's chemically identical to fossil-based plastic, which means it can be recycled. It can fit already into our existing product and process streams and all of this kind of thing. So I learned a lot more about business and industry. And then from there, I worked for a company now called ThinkStep that does life cycle assessment. That is what they do. So I got to do more than just biofuels. I got to do agricultural products. I got to do food products, but also other sorts of bio-based interesting materials. But I also got to learn about how electronics are made, construction products, even yoga mats. So I have done these kinds of assessments and produced the types of results I'm going to talk through today on many, many different types of products. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is not my own personal original research. It's more like my curated research of research, like a meta-analysis. I went out and found good resources from names and journals that I know and trust and understand to present to you today. Now, I work for WSP. I still do the same thing, but for many other clients. And now I even get to do things that aren't physical products, like data storage in the cloud. What is the environmental impact of that? Talk about, like, blow your mind. And I do teach students, masters, graduate students at UC-Berkeley about life cycle thinking and how to make our products more sustainable. So I hope that lends some credibility to what I'm going to say. And yes, I'm still vegan, have been, will be on into eternity. Okay, so first the good news. This one will shock no one, I hope, in this room. Veganism is the lowest global warming potential, GHG emission, diet, lifestyle you can pick, bar none. This is one infographic that I found. By the way, if you want my slides when I'm done, just come get my card and I'll send them to you. I made sure I put all the sources for everything if you want to go see where this came from. This happened to come from Made Just Right, but they sourced the data to make the infographic, which I think speaks better than other ways of presenting data from scientific studies. But I don't really want to dwell on this because if you come away with nothing else from my talk, being about the environment is not just being about the climate. It's so much more than that. And if you're vegan and you care about animals, I hope by the end of this talk you understand why you need to care about the environment too. I'm sure you already understand that. Well, whatever, we'll see. Okay, water. This one's more interesting, I think. From a water consumption standpoint, most vegan products, food sources, have lower water footprints. That's total water consumed, made unavailable, not just gross water use, than other food products. And the thing that came out recently that kind of drove me completely insane was that whole thing about the almonds. Oh, it takes a gallon of water to make an almond. Do you know how much water it takes to make a cheeseburger? Shut up. Like, oh, the almonds, da-da-da-da-da. Well, here's a shocker. Look at chickpeas. Holy. For some reason, this particular infographic didn't have almonds, but from what I found, it's approximately equal to asparagus. So like, whoa, chickpeas, almonds, chickpeas, almonds. Like, but still, beef, right? Water consumption for any agricultural product is large. Yes, you need water to make plants. But when you grow plants, especially perennials, not annuals, especially things like trees, like almond trees, rather than corn, which is an annual and has to be tilled under every year, you're sequestering carbon. Their root systems can help clean and purify water, improve soil quality. It's night and day. You cannot compare, in my opinion, almonds to beef, bar none. Not even chickpeas, really. And regardless, obviously, we got to eat. If water is something that concerns you, still, I firmly believe by choosing a vegan lifestyle, you're reducing your overall water footprint. And just to do a quick comparison, you can go to this water calculator online, and I ran the exact same scenario with me as a vegan and then me as someone who ate kind of standard American meat a couple times a day and dairy and eggs and all that kind of thing. And my water footprint went from me as a vegan to the calculator said, wow, you're low. And then me as not a vegan, as a standard meat eater, didn't change anything else to, oh, you're average. Here's some stuff you can do to reduce your water footprint. And if you're curious, things that you can do to reduce your water footprint, in addition, as a vegan, have a lot to do with your energy sources, actually. So check out this water footprint calculator if that's of interest to you. Again, if you can't write it down that quick, ask me for my slides. Okay, nitrogen. Why is nitrogen important? This has to do with water as well. Not consumption, but water quality. Does anyone in this room know what the word eutrophication means? Yay! Eutrophication is a fouling mostly of freshland inland waters. You can do it to oceans, but if you've ever seen a water that turned green from an algal bloom, that is eutrophication. It comes from an excess of nitrogen and phosphorus and other key elements and nutrients in the water. Algae bloom, eat all the oxygen, kill all the fish. Not good. Also, I would say, not vegan, because it kills all the fish. So a humongous source of nitrogen emissions, especially into the Mississippi River, going down into the Gulf of Mexico, causing a dead zone, is nitrogen fertilizer runoff and phosphorus. So if you do not eat very much of the commodity crops that need a lot of nitrogen, like corn, and I'm talking about field corn, which is different from sweet corn, then you will have a lower nitrogen footprint. Well, we don't eat field corn. We humans, most of which not the ones in this room, eat things that eat field corn like animals. So I ran, again, I ran the average United States person, and then me as a vegan, and my nitrogen footprint went way down, mostly because of that red bar, which is from agriculture. Strangely enough, though, not as low as the average German. I don't understand that. I'd have to dig into more about how exactly they calculate that, although they do have very different rules and regulations about agriculture in Europe that we don't have in this country. Maybe we should. Okay, Land. Land is important as well. I found this very interesting study that came out just recently showing the land impacts from a high animal product diet, which is over here, down to a this is vegan diet. As you can see, the smallest user of land is the vegan diet. Again, great news. You want more about it? We have to look at this study. Avoided deaths. This was a very interesting study. So basically, they calculated the number of avoided deaths from going from the standard diet practiced in these regions of the world to a vegetarian diet, which is VGT, and then what would it be as a vegan diet. So avoided deaths, so bigger number, good. And in every scenario, whether we're talking about the whole world or the developed world or the developing world in various regions of the country, the highest avoided deaths came from the vegan diet. Big frickin' surprise. Well, not a big surprise to me. Apparently, big enough surprise to them to get published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, which is an extremely prestigious journal. Like, it's a notch below Science. So PNAS, this, in 2016, when I saw this, I was like, wow, the word veganism made it into PNAS? I can't believe that. Okay, also from that study, something about economic impacts, and this is a way of valuing the environment and mortality and morbidity, like disability, in terms of dollars, again, from changing diets. And again, greatest economic value, high number, good, vegan, got the highest numbers. So basically, all I'm trying to say to you is, woohoo, vegan party, yes! Not just for the environment, not just for the climate, but for the water quantity, the water quality, land, social impacts like health, economic impacts. Going vegan, best thing you can do. But for many of you in this room who I'm sure are already vegan, now comes the not so great news. It's not enough. It's a great first step. Yes, I congratulate you all. And if you're like me and have been vegan for a really long time, after a while you start asking yourself, if you care about the environment, what else can I do? Or what am I doing that's not good for the environment that's vegan that I didn't know about? Okay, so there's this other interesting quiz you can take online, which basically calculates how many planets would it take to support life on Earth, all humans on Earth, if everyone lived like you. And me as a vegan, living in San Francisco, taking the bus to work, trying to be as sustainable as I possibly can, still takes 3.4 planets. That's down from the last time I took this quiz, which was 3.7 planets. So I've done something better. So, still not sustainable. Still not sustainable, even with all of my vegan choices. Why is that? Well, tons and tons of reasons that I don't have enough time to go into. But what I want to take home to you is you can make choices that are vegan, that are not good for the planet, and that I would argue because they're not good for the planet, they're not vegan. Because they hurt animals. They destroy habitat. They drive animals literally to extinction. How many people in this room know about the controversy about palm oil? Okay, I kind of figured that was going to happen. You're a very educated audience. But I still talk to some people sometimes, even vegans, who are like, oh, I eat stuff that has palm oil in it, and they don't understand like that might be a problem. Why is that a problem? Deforestation, driving orangutans to extinction, literally to extinction. Not to mention the fact that when they deforest, and it's often burning these forests or peatlands, they're emitting humongous amounts of carbon, which cause the climate to change, which is causing ocean acidification, which is going to kill fish, which is causing, they think it might be tied to whatever is killing all the frogs in South America. I mean, global climate change affects animals in such a way that it will drive many of them to extinction. And I do not believe that human beings are contributing to climate change. Using the word believe, I reserve that for things that are mythical, like fairies. I am a scientist. It is fact. I do not need I don't use those words. Climate change is happening. Humans are causing it, and it is having negative effects on animals. Okay, here's something you might not know so much about. Sugar production, especially from sugar cane, grown in the Amazon region, especially in Brazil. Tons of sugarcane. Now, some of that sugarcane has been grown there for decades. It's not actively contributing to deforestation, though some new plantation is actively contributing to deforestation. But regardless, a dominant method of harvesting sugarcane is called slash and burn. Literally, set it on fire. It is not the only way to harvest sugar, and there are roundtables on sustainable sugar sourcing that advocate for and certify some farms that they don't do this. There are others mechanized ways of doing this instead. But when you set it on fire, you release particulate matter into the air, which you probably know is very bad for humans to breathe in, gets lodged in your lungs, causes all kinds of problems. Well, big surprise, not so good for other animals to breathe it in either, and it's right next to forested lands. Other toxic elements that go into the waterways as a result of all of this burning and stuff like that. So now, I acknowledge not all sugar comes from sugarcane, not all sugar comes from the Amazon. Yeah, I know, but it's usually not labeled, right? Unless you can specifically seek out sugar that didn't come from there, that comes from something else. It's very difficult to parse. But generally, as long as it has not been processed with bone char, people consider sugar to be vegan, right? Okay. And I am in no means shaming anybody. I just want people to become aware, because when I became aware of these things, I was like, oh man, I don't know what to do. So I'm just trying to spread knowledge and information. Agave. All right. This is a popular one among vegans. And I remember when it first came out, I had been vegan for a while, and people were like, oh, agave syrup, it's great. And I was like, what is this stuff? I don't even know. Like, isn't that what you make tequila out of? Like, what? They were like, it's instead of honey. And I was like, it's been so long since I had honey, I don't even care anymore. But when I was in graduate school, when I was in my master's program, we had a visiting scientist from Oaxaca, Mexico. He was a sociologist, and he was studying the agave craze, which was not really for agave syrup, it was for tequila. But basically, he was talking about these different land tenure systems and how farmers would have land and they would enter into contracts with agave producers. And it takes a long time to grow agave, like 7, 8, 9 years to grow until you get this harvestable bulb, right? And so he was studying from a sociological standpoint during the time that the farmers essentially leased their land to the agave producers. They were not allowed to go on their land. They were not allowed to do any sort of other farming in and around that land, like subsistence farming. So they had to switch to other methods of farming. And then he also noticed that the way that the agave was being planted was vertically kind of up the hillside in parallel rows up the hillside, right? As opposed to sort of stepping it down, right? And if you're a soil scientist and you see lines like this and a hillside, what do you think? Erosion, yes, big time. Big time, especially at harvest. And he was studying and watching the harvest, and he discovered that the reason why they were planting it this way was so that on the day of harvest, when they harvested the balls and they chop off all these spiky leaves that really, really, really hurt if you touch them, so that they could literally roll the balls down. That's why, causing massive erosion, not to mention leaving behind these humongous root systems, such that when the land tenure agreement was over and they sold the agave and everything, and the farmers could opt to get their land back or opt to re-up and do more agave, they were left with land with terrible erosion, all these big bulbous roots everywhere that they would have to go and dig up if they wanted to actually plant something else, essentially useless land. They had made their land not sustainable anymore. And this, combined with some other things that I've read about agave production, led me to believe this is not a sustainable choice alternative. I personally avoid agave. I'm not totally super strict about it because I know that a lot of really great, vegan producers, and they're trying to sell products to the market, they'll still put agave in their things. I try to educate them, but I don't go out and buy agave syrup. Okay. So does that leave us with sweet nothing? It's always maple syrup. That's expensive. Artificial sweeteners, no. Stevia, I haven't read anything bad about its ecological footprint yet. maybe there hasn't been enough study. For now, it personally is my sweetener of choice. I use it at home, I use it in my baking, all of this kinds of things. And I also have not read of any studies showing substantial negative health benefits. But that also leads me to honey, of course, is not vegan. I completely ascribe to that. I do not eat honey. But there's this other really interesting question, because I've studied agriculture. I was a farmer. If honey isn't vegan, why is it that eating the plants and the fruits and the nuts and the vegetables that are pollinated commercially by bees, why is that vegan? Because the main driver, and I have talked to apiarists, beekeepers, the main driver why they keep the bees is not for the honey. They do not make enough money off the bees from the honey. It's almost like a byproduct. In fact, and I learned this from living in the San Joaquin Valley for a year. I was working with low-income farm worker communities. In fact, the honey that comes from pollinating almonds is not saleable. If you've ever seen it, it is lime green and it tastes horrible. They can't sell it from setting the bee boxes out in almonds. And has anyone ever driven through the San Joaquin Valley, like in the flowering season? Have you ever gotten your windshield splattered with bees? Yes, I have. I have had to drive to my communities during almond pollination season and had my windshield splattered with lime green dead bees. And I wasn't trying. I'm like, I'm murdering. But, I got to get to the community. I'm trying to help them get a water system. So it's just a question. It's a question, and I struggle with this question personally because I eat almonds. I love blueberries and cranberries. If you know what solans are, that's the nightshade family. That's tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, berries. Cucurbits are the cucumber, squash, watermelon, melon family. All need bees, all of them. Even your local, organic farmer. And I'm sorry I missed the veganic talk because I'm very curious how it is, unless you live in an area where the natural pollinators are healthy and vibrant, because if anyone's ever heard of colony collapse syndrome, natural pollinators in our environment are on the decline. We think because of pesticides, but we're not entirely sure what exactly is driving it. It might be GMO crops, we don't know. I've also heard of a strange mite infestation. I have a colleague at UW-Madison who studies bees, and I ask her all the time, I'm like, so what is it? What's killing the bees? And she's like, well, we don't know. We got like a bunch of theories, and we're trying to figure that out. So reflection, I think I'm doing okay on time. I don't know where's my timekeeper. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm like speaking at a mile a minute, but I have so much to cover. I still have 20 minutes? Wow, okay, well then we can have a discussion because I really want to know what you think, and I could tell you so much more about everything I just talked about. Like, I tried to keep it down, but I do this for a living, and I see these studies all the time, and I'm always very curious and interested, and I love bringing it all together and presenting it to an audience of people who are actually interested in it. But yes, many studies, many of which are life cycle assessments, that's what I do, LCA, show that the vegan lifestyle choice is lowest in carbon emissions, lowest in water consumption, lowest in nitrogen, lowest in land use and land use change. And that's all well and good and great. And again, if you want my slides and you want to know, you want to have this in your arsenal of facts to give people to whom this speaks to, like your fellow scientists, just let me know. Got to bring the science. And so, I mean, that's all well and good and great, but it's not the only thing. There are other things. There are choices that you can make that have nothing to do, that can be vegan choices and have nothing specifically to do with animal rights or animal welfare or anything like that, that are bad for the environment in a variety of ways. Bad for the environment in a ton of different ways. So there are some important questions, and this is the question I always come back to. If you care about animals and you care about protecting animals, and that's why you went vegan, I believe that you have to then also care about the health and wellness of the environment, because dozens of animals go extinct each year, right? Animals and other types of living things, non-animals, plants, fungi, these sorts of things are also going extinct. And it's because of human actions on the planet not just climate change, also water consumption and water quality, fouling of lakes, rivers, and streams and the ocean. So as was mentioned, I went vegan because I read Frances Moore Lappe's book, Diet for a Small Planet, when I was in high school. And the overwhelmingly obvious thing to me was that my choices affected the planet and therefore affected animals, humans being one of those types of animals. And so I came to veganism through environmentalism. And I found animal rights later. Some people say to me, and I've seen studies that actually show that people are more likely to go vegan than stay vegan if they come to it through animal rights first. And I'm not disputing that. I don't doubt that's true. I am the exception to that rule. 17 years, not going back. Like, going back is akin to, like, I don't know, losing both of my arms. I can't even imagine what life would be like, not vegan. But the two are not separate. I still see environmentalism as an umbrella that encompasses animal rights and human rights and other types of rights, because we all depend on this planet to live. And there, like I said, there are things that you can do that are considered vegan that are not good for the planet, that drive animals to extinction and kill them, or fundamentally deprive them of their habitat that they need to get food, to be able to mate, to reproduce, to just live their lives. How can that be vegan? In my mind, it can't. It's not. It's just not vegan. So, but in the same breath, we have to live. We have to go about our lives. We're doing the best that we can. So I just want to plant that seed of thought in your mind to start thinking about these issues and dig a little deeper before you buy that thing, whatever it is. Whatever it is, whether it's something about palm oil. I have looked into RSPO, Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, and tried to figure out how rigorous are their quality assurances and their standards. And they do audits. They actually audit the palm oil producers to make sure that they're not actively deforesting, they're not actively driving away orangutans. I have some confidence in it. I still try as hard as I can to avoid palm oil. But there are other things. I actually did a study for, I can only say this now because they actually published it on their website. You can go see it if you want. But they did a comparison of their algal oil. They make algal oil, not in open ponds, in contained reactors, feeding them sugar from sugarcane that has been historically grown on land that has been in sugarcane for a long time, and they contract with a sugarcane producer that does not use slash and burn. That was like their requirement. It had to be not actively deforesting, not using slash and burn. And what I did was a life cycle assessment comparing their oil, their algal oil, which is a food oil, and can also be used in cosmetics and personal care products, to palm oil, palm kernel oil, canola oil, soybean oil, and tallow, rendered beef fat. In order to do this research, I did not actually have to touch any of these substances. It's all about scientific research about how these things are produced. So I just had to research how are these things produced, model how they are produced, and come up with a GHG emission number for that, and a water consumption, number for all of those oils. And their oil was the lowest. And some things shocked me. So the oil, and I also compared it to olive oil. That was the other one, sorry. The oil with the highest water consumption was olive oil. Really high water consumption. Mostly because a lot of olive oil that we buy is from Europe. The predominant producer of olives for European olive oil is Spain, closely followed by Greece, and I'm blanking on the other country. I want to say Italy, but I might be wrong. But these are very arid regions, and it requires a lot of irrigation of these olive oil trees, of these olive trees, to grow the olives, to make the olive oil. That actually made me choose oils differently. After I did that study, I try not to use olive oil, actually, and I bought their oil. It was amazing to buy this bottle of oil that I was like, I did the LCA on this. I did that. I know for a fact exactly what the global, climate change impacts of this oil are. That's phenomenal, and water. And that oil that they made was also lowest in global warming potential. Palm oil and palm kernel oil, really high, in part because of deforestation and land use change. The other oils, like grapeseed oil, were in a more moderate range. Sorry, not grapeseed oil, canola oil. We didn't do grapeseed oil. Canola oil was in a more moderate range. Tallow, obviously, was really high, rendered beef fat. But these kinds of studies and this kind of information is continually being done, and I'm really excited. And I love the fact that even though, yes, I work in private industry, I get to do this work, and I get to make sure that this work gets done right because I did it. And nobody's cooking the books, and I'm not gonna, play favorites, and I don't care if you're paying me to do this study. If the numbers don't look good, the numbers don't look good. And then I can talk to you about how we can make it better. But anyway, I hope I provided you with some interesting thoughts and questions, and I don't claim to have all the answers. I just want to be thought-provoking. And with that, any questions? Okay, lots of questions. So you had your hand up first.
So what cooking oil, had the lowest
water consumption? The algal oil, actually.
Algal?
The algal oil made by this company that I did the research for. And yes, I know I did the research for it, but sugarcane doesn't require a lot of irrigation, and
so it's oil made from sugarcane?
So they feed sugar to algae, and then the algae grow, and then they squish the algae and get the oil out.
It's called algal oil.
Algal oil, yeah.
What do you switch to?
So I did buy it, and I do use it, and I try not to use as much olive oil. There were other oils that were not tremendously high. I guess I should have put that graph in this. Well, anyway, if you email me, I can send you the link to their online report, which was based on the LCA that I did.
You cannot run the mic around.
Okay, I saw a hand back here, yes.
You were talking about the quiz that analyzed your footprint as a vegan, and you kind of alluded it was high because of energy choices.
Yes.
Can you please talk more about that?
Yeah, so there is a lot of embodied impacts in where you get your energy from. That's not surprising. To some extent, it's not in your hands because you rely on your regional grid. California has a pretty good regional grid, and it's getting better. Shifting away from coal, though shifting away from coal often means replacing with natural gas. From a greenhouse gas emissions standpoint, energy sources like nuclear are actually very low in greenhouse gases. Trade-offs, I understand that. I'm not in charge of the national energy grid. But then there are some surprises. So one surprise is hydropower. Very low in greenhouse gas emissions, very high in water consumption. And that it's only from the stored type where you create a dam and a reservoir because there's a lot of evaporation off of that reservoir. Water consumption means water leaving a watershed or becoming fouled in some way that it can no longer be considered clean water or what's called blue water, right? So if it leaves physically in a product, so every year California ships alfalfa with 10% moisture content on average to China to feed to animals. We are literally shipping our water out of California. That's considered consumption because it's leaving our watershed. Same thing with hydro. If it evaporates, it goes into the atmosphere, it moves, it leaves, we don't have it anymore. Hydro, big, big, big source of water consumption. You don't see that if you only look at climate change when it comes to different energy sources. The types of power with the lowest greenhouse gas emission and water footprints, if that's what's important to you, no big surprise, the other types of renewables. Solar, not just PV, but solar concentrating, large-scale wind, geothermal, all these kinds of things, pretty low. Of the fossil fuels, natural gas, actually not that bad. I see us needing to use some fossil fuels to transition off of fossil fuels. It's like you know, taking a nicotine patch because you're trying to get off of cigarettes. You know, it's like we need a crutch along the way. But yeah, there's lots of really, really good studies about power as well. And companies are paying attention to this. Getting to work in the private sector, I get to see this. A lot of companies are like, what can we do? How can we be using more renewable energy? Or if we can't directly use it, how can we incentivize its use? How can we fund it? How can we buy credits and make sure that to get more renewable energy on the grid, which everyone benefits from? I saw a question here. Yes?
If non-nutritive sweeteners, such as stevia or synthetics, doesn't matter, is given to either humans or animals, then their brain, their body starts to adapt looking for carbohydrates coming in. There's no actual carbohydrates coming in, and so then they're hungry. And so it tends to cause weight gain.
I have not personally experienced that with stevia.
Right.
Before I started eating this stuff, I looked into the research, and scientific studies with stevia, I did not see any that showed negative outcomes. I didn't see any that showed like some amazing positive outcomes. And I've heard about what you're talking about, the whole mind-stomach connection of you're intaking sweetness, your body's expecting carbohydrates, they aren't there, therefore you eat more. I have not seen a study that definitively demonstrates that to my level of scientific rigor. So I don't doubt it could exist. I want more facts. I want more science. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so the honey question. So
Yeah.
you showed it in your list the case where it's commercially transported hives, and then there's colony collapse and everything. So have you seen anything where there's certification where there are wild bees pollinating wild crops, and then the honey is gathered through the drippings, no smoking of the bees? Have you seen any of that?
No. I personally have not seen that. I know some small-scale farmers that I have met personally throughout my life that keep small hives, but they don't go in and collect the honey. They keep them on their farm specifically to ensure high levels of pollination so that they can harvest enough crops to make a living. But they don't harvest the honey. I'm not in any way advocating eating honey. I'm just posing a question. I see a hand here. I'm so glad there are questions.
Lately, I've been thinking about a lot of the vegan foods are in plastic and what the plastic is doing to the ocean and the wildlife.
Yes, the ocean garbage patch. This is a question, it's actually an existential battle in my own home because it's actually, we talk about milk containers, milk, M-Y-L-K, because most unmilks come in a variety of containers, right? And so I actually wrote a blog post about this for my work, talking about the different environmental trade-offs between aseptic pack or Tetra Pak, that's shelf-stable packaging, versus glass, cartons, and plastic, which are either recyclable or compostable, but need to be refrigerated in transport. So I did a high-level assessment, just trying to put a number to how much energy is used when the boxed milk that has to be refrigerated leaves. It has to go in a refrigerated truck some distance. Then it goes to a distribution center, has to be refrigerated. Then it goes in a refrigerated truck again to your local distributor, your grocery, your co-op, whatever. And then it sits in an open refrigerated case. Ugh, as an engineer, those things drive me insane. They're literally just like refrigerating the entire store. I'm like, put doors on that thing. And my little co-op where I do shop, they do have doors. Oh, thank you. But in most grocery stores, it's just this big thing, right? And it's just open, just refrigerating. Huge waste of energy, and therefore greenhouse gas emissions and water and all these kinds of things. And then you take it home, and sometimes it goes bad before you can even finish all of it. 40% of the food in the United States is wasted. That's a statistic from the USDA, and a lot of that has to do with refrigeration. And then I look at my aseptic pack, and I'm like, never refrigerated in transport, storage, purchasing, sits on my shelf until I am ready to use it. It's a smaller quantity. It's usually 4 servings as opposed to 8. And I consume it before it goes bad. But its end of life is not so good. In the United States, currently in most locations, Tetra Pak or aseptic pack is not recyclable. So it has to go into a landfill. It's not to say that it isn't recyclable. It is. It's just that most places do not go through the often cumbersome and expensive process of recycling, because you have to literally peel apart layers of plastic and metal and paper to get the recycled components. But so you have trade-offs, and how do you compare those two things? Packaging that ends up in a landfill, and not all plastic and stuff is recycled in the United States. Tons of plastic ends up in the ocean or in a landfill where it still doesn't break down. There are places all over the country in the United States that still do not recycle. They do not recycle. And we are blessed that we have compost here. But so many municipalities are like, compost, what? They don't even have recycling. So personally, I look at the embodied energy and I choose a septic pack. My partner, he chooses the compostable carton, which still has a plastic little spouty thing. But I make sure he drinks all that milk before it goes bad. Because then you got to think about all the embodied energy it took to make that milk. It's like, oh, and it gets wasted. Nobody ever even consumes it. It drives me insane. But I hear you, and I wish and I hope that more industries pay attention to their packaging. And I actually had a very interesting conversation with some folks from Cliff Bar about that, and they are trying really hard to address it. Their packaging is recyclable if you send it to TerraCycle. So we have a bag at home, and we put all the stuff that can go to TerraCycle, which includes Cliff Bar wrappers and Tom's of Maine toothpaste tubes. And we box it up and we send it away. But for a while we have this big bag of Cliff Bar wrappers and toothpaste tubes. It's kind of silly. But yes, that's a very important point.
Well, let's thank Dr. Julie for this informative talk. And it's a great reminder, because I think as vegans, we all are admonishing fellow environmentalists to go vegan. But for ourselves, there's always more we can do as we learn more. And thanks for giving us some solutions and some ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks all of you. That's our final talk. There's still